Hello everyone, welcome to another Venruki video. In this video we're going to be talking about some of the changes that just went in. Lots of damage tuning went in regarding PvE. So all these changes I do believe are specific to PvE, but I think they might actually have ramifications in PvP and maybe even in some cases change up the meta a little bit. So we'll talk about that. In addition, they also just made a change to Torghast. So you will now unlock your highest layer of Torghast for your ult. So no longer if you make an ult, you have to go through layer 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 8 for Torghast. If your main has done layer 8, your ults can do layer 8. So that's the first little bit of good news. Now, if we look at these adjustments that have come in, and we'll get into the specifics of it, they basically did a bunch of damage tuning, little minor changes. And this is kind of what we wanted in PvP, where you take some of the worst specs and you prop them up a little bit. You give them a little bit of damage changes. If you take a look at this graph right here, what seems to be the cutoff exactly is at Frost Mage. So this is basically like the 95th percentile of damage, I do believe, for the raid. And you can see, Balanced Druids at the top, Affliction Warlocks, Fire Mages, Windwalker Monks, etc. You go all the way down to a Frost Mage, some of the classes and specs that aren't doing too great. Every single one of them, I do believe, got a buff. So Frost Mage, Sub Rogue, Frost DK, Fury Warrior, Havoc Demon Hunter, Enhancement Shaman, Destro Warlock, Arms Warrior, Assassination Rogue, Beast Mastery Hunter, and Survival Hunter. So if you look, here are all the changes that did come in, and we can go through them. And I kind of want to just talk about if I think this is actually going to impact these specs enough for them to be kind of relevant in the current meta. So Frost Death Knights, I already feel like Frost Death Knights do pretty well in PvP. Some people do disagree with me on that one, but there are teams, you have OTK as well as Method, and we actually see them play Frost Death Knights in the AWC, and I see it being a little bit more popular as well on the ladder when I queue. They're very good at setting up burst and kind of just one-shot combos, and they got a 5% damage buff. So I think this is actually a really... for me, I'm a little bit horrified, but I think Frost Death Knights are going to be really excited about this one. And I think we could see an even further rise of Frost Death Knights in PvP. Even though we're already seeing them, play and do pretty well at the top level, this is just going to solidify that even more and maybe provide some more opportunities for other Death Knights to kind of rise up and take advantage of that. The next change we do have is to Demon Hunters, Havoc Demon Hunters. Got a little bit of a damage increase, and this is another one of those specs you don't really see too often. And I think Havoc Demon Hunter actually has quite a bit of PvP utility with their new legendary, which gives them automatic darkness. They have auto blur. They have a lot of defensive capabilities. They still have reverse magic and mana burn. The one thing that they're lacking is their overall damage outside of their kind of one shot with their Night Fae ability. So I think this is a welcome change as well. And I think Havoc Demon Hunters, although it's not a massive change, it might be enough to see them be played a little bit more. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe 3% isn't enough, but definitely going to help them out, as it seems like the main thing they needed was more damage. For Hunters, we have Beast Mastery got a 5% buff and Survival got a 5% buff. I don't really play against these specs too often in Arena right now. It seems like most Hunters are opting to go Marksmanship, and because of the fact that Survivability and Beastmaster still kind of rely on their pet, I'm not entirely sure. Although we did get some changes to pets, the amount of damage that they receive is a little bit lower in PvP. I'm still concerned that even if they have damage, their pets are just such vulnerabilities, and once they die, they just can't get them back easily at all. It becomes really, really difficult. So I think these changes are nice, but at the same time, I feel like Hunters in PvP specifically, they do need a little help to assist them when it comes to getting their pets back up. And of course, a lot of Hunters still kind of complaining that maybe Marksmanship doesn't do as much damage, or the way Marksmanship does damage isn't that great. So maybe see some adjustments there, but I think it is interesting. Beastmaster and Survival might be viable. I'm not sure. We have Mage got a little bit of another buff as well. Frost Mage got a 3% damage increase, and we just got, I believe, a 9% damage increase, and the 9% damage increase was not enough to make Frost Mages viable. I had really high hopes for that, but overall it wasn't enough. But maybe now, with another 3%, we can hold on to the Frost Dream. Will it be a meme? I guess time will tell. Once these changes do go in, I'm certainly going to try Frost again, and I'm going to keep trying Frost because it's a spec that I love. But I still worry that Frost needs, actually we'll get into that, and actually we can get into it now. So I feel like some of these classes, like Frost Mage is one example. Havoc Demon Hunter might be another example of. It is nice that they're getting damage increases, but in PvP specifically, they need like single target damage increases. Like Frost Mages doesn't need its Blizzard to do more damage, you know what I mean? Like we want to see like Frostbolt hit a little bit harder, that single target damage, so you can actually push through some of that defense. I feel like Havoc Demon Hunter is kind of the same, where it has really, really strong AoE, but its single target damage is lacking. So I think that's the one drawback of these types of changes, where it's just you put an aura on a class and make them do overall more damage. When in some cases I feel like it's a little bit more complicated than that. But keep in mind, these changes are not for PvP. They're for raid and dungeon damage balance, but there are going to be ramifications. Like I said, Death Knight, I think they're going to be looking good. Of course, as a Frost Mage, you're not going to complain if you do a little bit more damage. But is it enough? That is the question. Assassination Rogues. This is a really interesting one because I was playing with Absturge from the Golden Guardians, and he was saying that they've actually experimented a little bit with Assassination before this 5% damage buff, and it wasn't that bad. So now with this 5% damage buff, maybe Assassination has, kind of the damage it needs to be viable as more of like a consistent damage specialization instead of that one-hit wonder like we see from Sub Rogue. So I'm curious to see how this one plays out, if Assassination is going to be played at all, because basically in PvP right now, all rogues are only playing Subtlety, and I feel like maybe a change like this, where you just get a little bit more damage for Assassination, might be able to make them viable in certain matchups and in certain compositions. So I'm curious to see how that one does play. Enhancement Shamans. Personally, I don't feel like Enhancement Shamans really needed damage in PvP, but this might make them even more viable. We don't really see them be played in tournaments that often. When you compare them to their counterpart, Retribution, it feels like Enhancement Shaman, while they do have a lot of things going in their favor, the one thing that's unfortunate for them is they still don't have defensive cooldowns really to survive like stun lock goes. If they can get off their heels, they're pretty durable, but they still are very susceptible to getting one shot. So I don't know if the damage buffs is going to make them necessarily more viable, but it's going to make them one shot you a little bit harder. And then, of course, Destruction Warlocks. This is one they just added. 5% damage increase on Destruction Warlock. Another one of those classes where I feel like they have pretty good utility in PvP. Like their kit overall isn't that bad, but they're lacking damage. And maybe this 5% damage buff is going to give them a spot in the meta and let them compete a little bit more. And then, of course, we get down. We'll save the best for last. We have Fury Warriors getting a little damage increase. Still don't know if it's enough. I feel like Fury Warriors at this point, they kind of need... I feel like a lot of the specs that are kind of underperforming happen to be a lot of these specs that you're seeing here. But I feel like it's not, I don't know if it's because Fury Warrior doesn't do enough damage. It certainly might be, but I feel like there's things that are missing from Fury Warrior. Like I do think they need like a Mortal Strike effect. And maybe even some of their PvP talents specifically tuned. But yeah, Fury Warrior getting a damage buff. And then this one is the most interesting because you take Arms Warriors are really good in PvP right now. They have a really solid kit in terms of defense and offense. Their consistent damage is really high, one of the highest we have in PvP. And when they do have all their cooldowns up, they can put out quite a significant amount of burst. I mean, it's not the same kind of burst you see from like an LE Shaman or a Fire Mage, but still, their damage is significant. So, them getting even more of a damage buff. I'm curious to see if we see any of these damage hotfixes offset in PvP, because sometimes that's what will happen, where you'll see an Arms Warrior get buffed, for example. I think this actually happened. They buffed Arms Warriors, and then they ended up nerfing them in equal amount in PvP, so they didn't become even more powerful as one of the best specializations in the game. It's kind of like if we saw Windwalker Monks 3% more damage, people would kind of freak out right now because they already do so much damage, or like Fire Mages 5% more damage. Those would be the kind of things you'd want to see offset with some PvP specific tuning, but these are changes that I do like to see. When you look, even though I feel like these changes, maybe they could be more targeted specifically to the weaknesses of these specializations. It's nice to see that, you know, you look at the classes that don't do enough damage or they're doing the bottom of the meters and they do get propped up a little bit just to make it a little bit more fair. So in that regard, I do like it. I do like the kind of the consistent small changes we're seeing. I'm curious to see if we're going to see any more PvP changes after this weekend, after this AWC. There's still some things I'm missing here. I saw a comment from Minpoike where he was like, yeah, or it was Minpoike and then Mystical, the Mistweaver monk. He said, oh man, it's so nice to see, you know, the buffs to the underperforming healer specs. So I think it's something interesting to note is it seems like damage is the main focus right now. The healers that are underperforming and maybe even the tanks that are underperforming aren't really getting too much changes, which is kind of curious to see. And maybe they'll end up making more of those tuning changes in the future. But I feel like I got to feel a little bit bad for, you know, specs like Mistweaver Monk who still haven't been given any love. But myself, as a Frost Mage, I'm going to be happy to test out this change, although I'm not getting too excited about it. The 9% damage change wasn't enough, but maybe enough 9%, 3%, maybe another little 4% here, maybe a little Frostbolt buff there. I will end up changing that up. But overall, pretty happy with these changes. I'm curious to see where that does bring us, but as always, I am really just happy to see them kind of buff up some of the specs that aren't performing as well. And I'm curious to see if they do any offsets for some of the classes that are already performing really well in PvP, or if this is just going to be a straight up buff for Arms Warrior. I guess time will tell, but yeah, those are my thoughts. Those are my impressions. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think. Is there any other specs that you feel like kind of need tuning? And even thinking about like PvP changes, is there any PvP changes you guys would like to see in the upcoming patch notes? That's my question to you. And yeah, if you guys like the video, and of course, follow the channel if you want to see more content like this. It's fun for me to go through these patch notes. I get these questions a lot in my stream, so it's nice for me to have like a video I can point to and give my, you know, concentrated thoughts on the subject matter. But anyways, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.